Hello everyone, and welcome to my ultimate survival guide for Classic Harcore, where I share my different tips and tricks that makes me able to level up a lot easier, but also increase the chance that I will make it all the way up to level 60 without dying. So in this case, I'm missing my frost armor, and therefore I'm not slowing the enemies whenever they hit me. This is a really bad situation, as I almost end up dying. But there's an easy way to prevent this from happening, simply by getting the add-on Weak Aura. In Weak Aura, you can set up a reminder that will remind you every time you don't have a buff active, and this can be changed to any buff in the game, no matter what class you play. You can change the scale, but also the position of the buff, and like you see right here, I dropped my frost armor, and now I get a reminder that I need to reapply it. Sometimes it might be cool to have amazing graphics enabled in the game, so the world will look a lot more alive. But the thing about this is that sometimes it will also be a lot more difficult to either track different objects, but also enemies in the area. But what I would highly recommend you to do when you play hardcore is to reduce the ground clouder, but also the environment details. Usually I change these all the way down to 1. This way I don't have to pay attention to any details and grass. Now it's a lot easier for me to track all the enemies, and objects at far distance will also be removed, but you can still see the enemies. Super useful when you need to make an emergency exit, but also when you need to find a specific enemy or object. When I fight a difficult enemy, or when I'm close to a road or a city, then remember you can always take advantage of the different guards. When you're fighting a hostile enemy, the guards will also help you. So if you manage to do more than 50% of the target's health in damage, then you will also grant experience and be able to loot this. Super useful against elite targets and other difficult enemies. On hardcore, there is a chance that you will disconnect and end up dying. Therefore, make sure to always have a high amount of health when you're fighting an enemy, especially if you fight in water environments. If you're either getting dazed, slowed or rooted, then there's also a high chance that you might end up disconnecting if you were moving or jumping at the same time. And sometimes this even happens on the ground as well. In this case, I was lucky enough to survive, simply because I had a high amount of health, but also because I had reduced my graphics settings to low so I could log in super quickly. When I'm about to level up, I also like to be efficient and pull more than one enemy at the same time. So during the fight, I will level up and grant 100% mana and health. I also like to do this when I need to do a difficult task, for example killing an elite. Then I pull a non-elite, and as I'm about to be low health and mana, then I finish off the non-elite, grant 100% health and mana, and then I take down the elite. Sometimes you might also struggle with enemies at your own level. This is maybe because you need a new weapon. And in the open world, there's many different vendors where you can purchase a decent weapon. I've made a complete guide with all the different weapon vendors that I use as a Horde and Alliance player, and I've left a link to this guide in the description below this video. A common thing that kills so many hardcore players is enemies patrolling in a certain area. So what I usually do is to mark the patrolling enemy with an icon. So when I take down an enemy, I can always pay attention to the patrolling one at the same time, simply because of the mark. And the funny thing is that as I was recording this, another player showed up, and this player definitely didn't know about the enemy that was patrolling in the area. So in this case, the player is about to loot a quest object, but at the same time, the patrolling enemy is also moving, and all of a sudden, a move that seems so innocent has also turned out to be the worst nightmare, where the hunter is almost about to die. Now that I'm already talking about markings, then I also like to do this when I need to kill a specific enemy. So I make a macro where I type in /target and the name of the enemy. And then I mark this enemy so I can easily find it even when it's inside or behind an object or house. I always do this when there's a lot of competition for a specific enemy, especially when it's a fresh server and there's a lot of competition in the starting zone. Another situation where I find these marks to be so useful is, for example, when I need to get past an area with many different enemies. This is, for example, when I need to get to wetlands as a low-level Alliance player. Here I use the marks to give me an indication of where all the enemies are, and when will be the perfect time for me to start swimming and hopefully also get into the city. If you're wondering how I do this, but also how I get to other locations without dying, either as a Horde or an Alliance player, then I would highly recommend you to check out my WoW Classic Harcore traveling guide. This can also be found in the description below this video. Being in the water can be so dangerous because of disconnects, but also if you're unaware of your breath. Therefore, I'll also use an add-on that warns me when I'm about to drown. The name of the add-on that warns me here is Rested Experience, but I guess there might also be other add-ons or maybe even a weak aura. But beside this, Rested Experience is also a leveling guide, and this guide has been developed for WoW Classic Harcore. It will allow you to level efficiently and safely all the way up to 60. And whenever there's a specific enemy you need to kill, then you can also press here and then it will mark the targets you'll need to kill. These will be marked with different icons. To the left, it will tell you what you will need to do next, what quest you will have to do, when you will need to repair, buy new spells, water and food, and many other things. And even when you need to change your Hearthstone and when you need to use your Hearthstone. And if I was, for example, tired of this zone, then I could always change to another one, and then it would let me know how I get to this zone, but also what I will need to do first to be as efficient as possible. And like I mentioned, it works from level 1 and all the way up to 60. However, you will need to pay for the full version, or you could always just download the free version that works from level 1 to 20. Talking about leveling, then it's also super important you kill enemies while you're running from destination A to B. So instead of just going to a city to hand in a quest, then if I kill enemies as I move there, I'll also gain a lot of additional experience. And trust me, this will be worth it, as long as you don't spend any downtime drinking or eating. So what I mean is that whenever I have a lot of mana, then I also spend this and killing enemies. And then whenever I drop down to around 40% health or mana, then I would continue walking to destination B, and as I walk there, I continue regioning, and when I'm back to 100% health or mana, then I can fight another enemy. You have probably heard this before, don't go into caves. But what about us that actually continues to do this, even though we are being warned? But to be honest, caves are not that big of a problem, as long as you know what you're doing, and you pay attention to your surroundings. So in this case, there's dead enemies behind me, and all of a sudden they also start to respawn. In a situation like this, I'll rush and start killing a target far away from the respawning enemies. That way, when I kill this target, I'll also move to the position where I pulled it. Close to this new enemy that I just killed, there will not respawn another one for the next couple of minutes. So this is going to be a safe zone. That way, I can then pull the enemy that just respawned, and now I've made a big safe zone, where I can regen and get to 100% health and mana. There's just one thing you need to be aware of. If there's a lot of nearby friendly players at the same area, then the enemies might also respawn a lot faster. If that's the case, then don't go into any caves. In a moment I'll show you the remaining things, but before I do this, then I would highly recommend you to give this video a like if you enjoyed it so far. That way I also know if people are interested in a part 2. But anyway, so as you see right here, the paladin just pulled a lot of creatures. For some reason, one of these didn't get pulled, so I decided to shoot at it. But what happens next is that the paladin also evades the fight, and when a move like this is being done, then sometimes there's also a chance that the enemies will not evade. Instead, they will run back and start attacking a nearby player. In this case, it was me. But because I was aware of this mechanic, then I also saved my character's life. So Blizzard has done an amazing job so far to prevent different kind of griefs. But the thing is that as a mage, then people can also break your sheep. This can be super deadly. So what I usually do when there's nearby players is to attack the enemy I need to sheep before I sheep it. That way I will be able to spam my sheep ability. But the thing is that if you pull with your sheep and you don't attack that target, then the other player will now be the one that have tapped the target, and that way you will not be able to sheep. And in this case, because I used a potion, then I'm also the one that is highest on the aggro table. So even though I cannot sheep and it's not my tag, then the enemy is now also attacking me, and this is super deadly if it's an elite target. So be aware of this and always make sure to shoot an elite target before you use your polymorph. At lower level, you can start doing different quests that rewards you with food that also provides a food buff. These I usually keep for later on, for example if I need to do an elite quest or killing more targets at the same time. So I would highly recommend you to try to do some of these quests and also keep the food for the perfect time. And sometimes when you do these quests that rewards the food, then you also get the recipe so you can cook it yourself. So make sure to keep the meat that you get, because food buffs will be a huge benefit on hardcore. Some of you might already have watched my hardcore profession picking guide. And in that guide I mentioned first aid being a great way to make additional gold when you level up. But beside this, then you should also pick this profession when you level up, no matter what class you play. It's a great way to get a heal in combat. Even as a paladin, when you use your bubble, you can also combine this to save mana. Bandages has saved me so many different times, especially when monsters all of a sudden also start to respawn. That way, I can actually CC them, get a bit of health, finish them off, and make an emergency exit. And no, you don't need a CC before bandages will be good. You could always root the target or slow it, get some distance, get a few ticks of healing, and then get back into combat. One thing that also kills many hardcore players are debuffs that does damage over time. For example, a poison. If you get hit by poisons and you're already low on health, then I would highly recommend you to run as fast as possible or pop your cooldowns and kill the target so you can get out of combat. Because you need to get a lot of healing done really fast, else you might die to the damage over time. In this case, the poison damage isn't that insane. But the thing is, the target is now fleeing, and if this is pulling new enemies, then I might also be kept in combat for maybe 10 to 20 seconds, and then the poison would probably end up killing me. So I hope you found these tips and tricks useful, and that it will help you level in Classic Hardcore. And hopefully you'll not end up dying at level 15 like I did right here. If there's any tips and tricks you would like to share with the rest of us, then make sure to post this in a comment below the video. This way I will also be able to include some of them in part 2. But yeah, as always, thank you so much for watching and have an amazing day.